Okay, so we want to finish up this Unit 2 lecture review by talking about what's the point. So if you find a sedimentary rock, what does that tell you? So one thing, it tells you something about the environment in which that rock formed. So if you find a conglomerate which is composed of rounded pebbles that are glued together, that tells you it was probably a river environment, and that particular material traveled a long time in the river because it was rounded. If you find a breccia that has angular pieces, then it hasn't been transported very far or for a very long period of time, and so that tells you that rock formed very close to the original rock that it came from. What about if you find coal? Well, coal tells you that original environment was a swamp. If you find sand in a sandstone, well, that could either be a beach or it could be a desert environment. If you find salt, well, then that tells you that it must have been an ocean that evaporated. Okay, what are some features created by sedimentary rocks? So we said that igneous rocks could make batholiths, sills, dikes, volcanoes. What kind of features can sedimentary rocks make? So the first one is going to be horizontal beds. So if you find rocks and they're in horizontal beds like that, then that tells you it was a very calm environment, like the bottom of an ocean floor, where materials precipitated down and it made layer after layer of horizontal sediment. Okay, another one is going to be cross beds. And so these are going to be created by wind or water currents that can cause these. And so notice that these beds are not horizontal. These are tilted. And so one way of making the beds to be tilted like this is if you've got a sand dune. So let's say that here is your sand dune. Sand is going to be rolling up the sand dune, and then it falls like that. So it's going to make a layer that is going to be tilted, and we can actually tell what direction the wind or the water was coming from based on the direction of these beds. So this is going to be, now let's say though that the direction changed. So maybe the direction of the water or the direction of the wind changed. Well, then what that can do is it can make a new sand dune that maybe would put the layers now like that, so they can be cross-bedded at angles to each other. Okay, you can also have a situation in this in which you have a rock that is composed of very large particles down here, but then on top of it is smaller particles, and then on top of it is actually even smaller particles. So what would make a situation like that? So this is going to be called a graded bed, caused by the rapid dropping of a load. So let's say that this is a continent over here. This is the continental slope, and then this is the ocean floor. So what can happen is sediments can accumulate here, but then due to an earthquake or something, then these sediments, they roll down to the bottom of the ocean floor. And so the heaviest materials are going to be the materials that drop out first. And then they're going to be covered up by materials that are a little bit lighter. And then finally, the lightest materials are going to be dropped on top of it. But now, let's say there's another earthquake. So more sediments fall on top of this. Well, on top of this layer, you'd start off with the big stuff again, and then the little stuff, and then the littlest stuff on top of it, so that you're going to have layer after layer after layer, and then each of the layers has large stuff on the bottom, medium stuff, and then lightest stuff on top of it. And so this is an indicator of something like an avalanche has occurred. Okay, then you've got ripple marks, which can be caused by either wind or water. So a sand dune is an example of a ripple mark. But you can also have ripple marks on the bottom of a river. And you can tell which direction the wind was blowing based on the shape of either the ripple mark under the water or the sand dune if it's above the water. So if you've got a situation like this, the steep part, so here's the steep part of let's say it's a sand dune, the wind must have been blowing in this direction in order to do it. So you can tell what direction the wind was blowing. Now, if you had one, so let's say that you've got one that is like this, and it's uniform. Well, then what must have happened is the water must be going this way, and then the water goes this way, and then the water goes this way. So if you have uniform ripple marks, then that tells you that the water is basically just sloshing, and that there was no average direction of the water movement. Okay, mud cracks. So you have mud cracks are going to occur in areas where it gets wet, and then it dries out, and then it gets wet again, and then it dries out. So it tells you something about the climate. Okay, in the same way that we had a chart that summarized igneous processes and igneous rocks, here is a chart that summarizes sedimentary processes and sedimentary rocks. So you have the environment in terms of plate tectonics, where these different kinds of things occur. Then you have the kinds of rocks that form as a result of these environments, and then you have the kinds of features that would be associated with these environments. So study this chart well for the Unit 2 lecture exam. Okay, so we've done sedimentary, we've done igneous, so now when I come back, we're going to do metamorphic.